In Turquoise's kingdom, right at the Adventurers Guild, a huge discussion was exploding in full swing. Out of every job on that list, one name got singled out fast. He was labeled a Tamer. In this world, monsters come in all shapes and sizes, and to control them, you've got to forge a contract. Then a Tamer steps into battle with their familiar, using it as unstoppable backup. The guild attendant straight up asks the young man in front of him how he's supposed to be a Tamer when he hasn't even showed up with a single monster. This wasn't even supposed to be work at all yet. The young man insists he's a Tamer who can tame phantoms. And even though the other guy can't see, his familiar's right there beside him, ready to move. A fire spirit named Claire showed up, and right then the young man started to look completely unhinged. Then the attendant cut the conversation short. So he kicks the kid out of the guild, and the young man is left with no choice but to go, because his divine job was to tame phantoms. Yet the contracts he made were with a race ordinary people can't even see. And that's why things always blow up like this. All around him, people hiss that he's an incompetent tamer of rumors, maybe even a liar. Yet the fire spirit at his side snaps back. No, that wasn't a lie. Claire snaps that everyone in that guild is stupid, like it can't be fixed. And honestly, that's as far as words can explain it. The spirit keeps screaming that everyone was a bunch of fools for ever believing Kohaku was lying. Kohaku blurts out that her anger somehow doesn't scare him at all. It actually steadies him, so he thanks her. And the girl lets out a long sigh, because a tamer should learn to snap and get upset, for his own good. The moment they were finally free to walk out of the guild, Claire leaned in and demanded what that young man planned to do next. Because every guild had turned them away, but he had no clue. And right then, trouble went from bad to terrifying. Even his own spirit couldn't figure out why Kohaku was chasing the title of a Tamer. Claire even offers to train him into a fire mage. But you can't lie about what you are. In this world, divine work wasn't just respected, it ruled supreme. If the job was truly good, he'd land a fat paycheck. But if not, all that would be left for him were crumbs. This was the world he was born into, and the protagonist had no escape. He had to live by its rules or get crushed. It was brutal and far from easy, but he pushed himself to do the right thing because he refused to stop believing it would all turn out fine. When he finally made it back home, Kohaku was slammed with an unbelievable welcome. Divine Wolf Fenrir stood there, and Sophia, the puppet spirit, was waiting too, alongside two of his other spirits. The maid snatched his clothes in a flash, and the wolf practically buzzed with curiosity about what things looked like outside. The tamer groaned, apologizing again because he just failed once more. Still, Fenrir fires back, "It's fine. As long as his master's by his side, he'll be happy anywhere." Kohaku is completely moved. She pulls him into a tight hug and thanks him for his words. Meanwhile, Claire snapped at Sophia for sniffing her master's clothes. Then Sophia scrambled to cover it up, only to get blasted with even louder shouts from the other spirit. The maid even calls her out, claiming she wants to do the same thing. She's just too embarrassed to admit it. That flips Claire into a rage-fueled fight, because she can't believe Fenrir would think up something that absurd. Then she drops the argument, and Fenrir turns to his master and demands what they're doing next. Now, Kohaku can only stare at it all and admit the brutal truth. He's marched into every guild in the kingdom and got shut down by every single one, so he finally calls out and demands the spirit's attention there. And he leans in and asks, "So what do you think about the idea of us moving to another country?" Rumors about him were already buzzing along the borders of Turquoise. So if anyone tried hiring guilds from other nations, there just might be one that would take him in, and the kind that didn't even know who he really was. Right then, the protagonists zeroed in on the Bruman Kingdom, an entire nation built around a guild of fearless tamers. Like always, the wolf gave in and followed his master anyway. Sophia and Claire were totally on the same page. They agreed, without hesitation, to follow him anywhere. Those words lit up his heart, and he felt truly relieved, like he could finally count on everyone's understanding. For now, they'd get ready to bolt the next day. Later, the maid slipped into the forest to deliver a message to a whole group of people. She spilled the shocking news that her master was about to abandon the kingdom, and that she'd already made up her mind to move with him. The moment word hit, everyone started to panic, because here, those people are basically treated like gods. So Sophia steps in and tells everyone to take a breath and calm down. They refuse to recognize Kohaku's worth. Then they shove him into a decision like that, because apparently they don't care what it costs him. So the maid blurts out that every single one of them is a spirit bound to the same master and, yeah, it's painfully obvious. It was obvious. He didn't feel a thing for this country anymore, the one that cornered him into this moment. The very next morning in Turkalize, the king got the terrifying news. There was no Oracle of Gaia anywhere, and even after they poured the offerings out to her, nothing answered back. The ruler's heart pounds with worry, but he has to hold tight to faith then, out of nowhere, the doors slam open and someone bursts in like it's an emergency. The holy warrior of the guild sword couldn't unleash a single one of his powers. That was a full-on gut punch. None of this was supposed to be real. The king stared at his kingdom's power. Baffled, how could something born from the spirit itself suddenly turn unusable? Then the nightmare hits again. People report the water tastes horrible and the crops start dying off for good. Even the guild's greatest mage crumbled, his powers vanished right alongside the alchemist. The air started turning toxic. Non-stop reports flooded in about demon hordes, and the king was certain this was the end they'd all been marching toward. Meanwhile, Gaia the goddess slams into the realization that she forgot to send greetings to the head of the church, and then another god shrugs it off, saying it was never needed at all. The moment everyone steps out of the country, it's game over for that place. Doom locks in forever, and even their final words can't change a thing. The other gods yanked back every power they'd handed to the people of the country, terrified they'd gain anything after hurting their master. So now all that was left was for them to march beside him to the other realm. The journey begins, and Kohaku starts chasing after it, step by step, until it finally pulls her in. He clutched that map and tore straight toward his destination, until they finally barreled into the kingdom of Bruman's capital, Alex. Claire refused to back down this time. She was sure it would work, as long as they trusted it. He hustled to the entrance, introduced himself on the spot, and handed over his documents. The guard leans in and demands, "So Kohaku, did you have any tamed monsters?" And yeah, he instantly panics because that guy clearly can't sense his spirit. So the protagonist says, "I don't have any yet." Honestly, this was the only way. He couldn't even bear to let anyone else see them. The guard clocks that Kohaku is brand new and greets him with real kindness. And Kohaku can't believe it. Man, for the first time in ages, someone finally treated him right. On the way, Sophia blurts out that the fastest path to the guild is from the other side. Even so, he could feel it. Every face in that place had zero clue who he really was. Everything's going to be fine, he whispers to himself again and again, forcing his panic to finally settle. When Kohaku finally stumbled into the guild, he stopped dead. This place was unreal, and every corner he turned had monsters lurking in the shadows. Gathered like this was exactly what a Tamer's guild always demanded. In the kingdom of Torkalife, the protagonist had never laid eyes on so many wild, different creatures in his life. That's when the creatures started fidgeting and breaking focus, and their tamers completely lost their grip. Turns out humans are blind to ghosts, but monsters? They see them all. Kohaku had seen it before, and Sophia leaned in, telling her with total certainty that ghosts were the noblest monsters of all monsters. Everyone else shrank back too because these things couldn't talk. All they could do was trigger fear, and that left them no choice but to lash out. So when the protagonist finally saw the truth, he stepped up to the tiny creature and apologized. So he stopped trying to scare it, held out an apple, and won it over. Right now, Kohaku marched up to the counter and demanded registration at the guild. The young man's mind races with apologies. He never meant to make the monsters nervous, and he's desperate to get out the second he can. When Kohaku showed up, the attendant flashed a smile and introduced herself, Saria, a member of the Tamer's Guild, and even though the protagonist tried to say hello, his voice came out all messed up, and embarrassment hit him like a truck. She didn't even flinch and told the young man to touch the sphere right in front of her, but Kohaku was completely clueless about what it even was. Saria told him the crystal basically read every monster like a menu showing what they were and how many could be tamed, then it automatically logged them into the guild. And the protagonist was caught completely off guard. He leaned in and asked whether that crystal could reveal the monster types, and the girl nodded, telling him, yep, it absolutely could. After that, the room went dead silent, like the whole world was holding its breath. which had the attendant panicking that she'd messed up until Kohaku shrugged it off and said, "It's nothing." And still, he couldn't wrap his head around it. Everything he'd hunted for forever had showed up almost instantly, right there in front of him. Claire barked at him to hurry because he was stalling at the table. At last, after that long breath-holding pause, the tamer pressed his fingers to the crystal. Then it erupted into a blazing glow. After a beat, Saria told him he could let go and check that. 3 golden lights shimmered there, and she'd use them to read the young man's info, then pin down exactly what he did for a living. The moment she scanned the registration book and clocked the details, the girl erupted into a startled scream, and just like that, she whipped around and demanded, "So, is Kohaku a ghost tamer?" All around her, the others just stared, utterly baffled by how wildly she'd lost it. The protagonist stammered with shaking nerves, words tripping over themselves. Later, Saria hauled him into the reception room and begged for his forgiveness on her knees after she'd screamed at him. That woman was so dramatic, it sent Kohaku's nerves skyrocketing, and she demanded to know at least why she'd screamed so much before, and the woman explained it plain, that crystal's light shifts depending on what kind of monster you're trying to tame. Red burns for beasts, purple for insects, green for elementals, and black for dragons yet ghosts. Their color is a total mystery. Until today, the guild's records never once mentioned a single golden color. So yeah, Saria figured the Taipei only got tamed because nobody knew the truth yet. And then bam! Turns out Kohaku really was a ghost tamer all along. With all those lights stacked up, he should have already inked 3 contracts by now. Somehow, Saria just knew where those 3 spirits were hiding. Claire and Sophia stared at that weird girl, dying to know what was really wrong with her, until the attendant broke into laughter like a total madwoman. He made the spirits freak out on the spot, and they bolted backward. Even Claire, who never usually flinched, snapped that this girl was straight up insane. And while they all wanted her gone, Kohaku grabbed everyone's shoulders and demanded they wait. Then Saria snapped her gaze to her, and with a shaky voice, she apologized for acting like a monster maniac. Now the protagonist could tell exactly what kind of person she was just from one look. At least he finally felt seen. But then he leaned in and demanded to know how he could prove his worth to the whole world, no matter what she heard. The attendant just shrugged and said it'd be a piece of cake. All he had to do was square up and beat the guildmaster. Right here, the hero gets marched straight under guidance into the arena of the Bruman Kingdom. Right there, Saria didn't hold back. She introduced Tamer's guildmaster, Toa Arihim. Toei greeted Kohaku, practically vibrating with curiosity. He couldn't wait to meet the ghost tamer. She burst out laughing the second she saw him freak out. He looked just like an adorable kid, and the protagonist hurried to explain that he wasn't brand new. He'd already hit 20. Yet to her, he was still just a kid, and that crushed him, because they both looked like they were the same age. This woman radiated intimidation the moment she stepped in. You could honestly say Toa was a tamer on a whole different level, way stronger than most. Her very presence pulled everyone in like a magnet, and even when the guildmaster couldn't spot a single one of them, they still burst into pure excitement. The whole group was messing around with her like it didn't matter at all. For Kohaku, this was the one shot he had to land a real job, so he snapped his fingers right then, leaving Toa totally baffled. The young man leaned in and said this was his way of summoning his spirits back. Tuas let out a shaky sigh, because yeah, ghosts really were invisible. And that was a huge relief for Kohaku, since she actually trusted what he said. So the master took one look at him and decided it was time to throw him into the lair of a real monster. Then she shot out her hands and shouted for Crush. Ghosts don't reveal themselves in front of anyone, in the eyes of everyone. They weren't just unwanted, they were something that shouldn't exist at all. They existed and dragons weren't hiding at all. Everyone could spot them for what they were. Because they were real, everyone knew the truth. No doubts, no guessing. They understood that, and still, they were the deadliest beings on the entire planet. Kohaku stared in pure disbelief, because this Drake-type dragon was no joke while Toa lit up, loving every second of his shock, since she'd just tamed an insane black dragon. Different dragon classes ruled the sky, and the Drake sat at the very top of the pyramid. Most of the dragons were plain gray, but then you'd spot the bold ones: red, blue, green, yellow, even white. Then the real nightmare showed up. Black dragons. The strongest drakes were always that black, and they snapped with irritable, savage fury. So yeah, this thing wasn't just scary. It was the real deal, pure, living terror. Still, her calm was so ridiculously peaceful that it felt downright funny. The protagonist leaned in and asked, "Are you really sure you can beat me, just you and me, one-on-one?" The three nodded, and Kohaku decided to put her faith in them, because they made it sound ridiculously easy. So if it came to that, he'd have to beg Claire to handle it this time. Because the others were crushed. They weren't picked, but they swallowed it. Sophia even snapped a warning at Claire. "Don't you dare embarrass us, or I won't let you off." And the fire spirit just chuckled while Claire's colleague was spiraling over being left out. Finally, Toa leaned in and demanded to know if Crush's opponent was here. Even after Claire's teasing antics, the protagonist sat down with the master and told her about his ghost. She was a fire spirit, and she'd been one of his contracts. After one heartbeat, the woman's expression snapped into something so frightening it made the young man's blood run cold. Still, Claire shot back that it was totally fine and reminded him exactly who she was. Then told him he could just hand everything over to her. That spirit's confidence spread like wildfire. So Kohaku swallowed her doubts and decided to trust her word. Words flew, and Surya ripped through a quick check. Everyone ready? The moment both sides gave the nod, the duel exploded into action. The dragon ripped open the sky with a blast of firepower straight at the protagonist. Then he threw up a magical barrier forged from his own spirit, because a black dragon's breath could turn steel to dust, and Toa fully expected it to turn him into ashes too. Kohaku bragged that Claire was the strongest fire elemental, so she could wipe out any flame attack, and that sweet talk lit a fire under the ghost, pushing her harder to prove she was unstoppable. The master mulls it over and tells Crush, "Move again." Again, his attacks slammed into the magical barrier and every single one got blocked. It was the very first time anyone dared to stop the dragon's claw mid-swipe. Just barely. If Claire had missed by a hair more, her magic would have shattered. Once more, the master grabs Crush by the momentum and orders him to make his move. The moment it hits, the protagonist snaps with panic and yells for Claire to spin around right now. The dragon's attack ripped through the barrier and shattered it to pieces. He shattered it with pure power, and Toa shot him a blazing compliment right after. Right on time. Kohaku realized his spirit would have taken a hit if he hadn't backed off. That was the enchanted power at work, some special body packed with magic meant only for humans, dragged and controlled by a dragon. It all came down to his deal with the Tamer who wielded enchantment. Magic. So Kohaku shoved Claire to the front, and now it was their turn to crash in with an attack. The spirit unleashes a breath that mashes every fly to dust. He rockets forward, dodging at the last second straight toward the master. Master stares down the ghost in front of her and realizes it's terrifyingly strong, so strong it shuts down every one of her attacks with a dragon's breath-like presence. Even knowing it was true, Kohaku still couldn't help but get rocked. Because a fire spirit that could swing magic however it wanted? That's wild. Kohaku fires back. It makes sense. They can control the temperature anytime they feel like it. Every last one of them was tuned for heat-based powers, like they were born to burn. Hearing that, Toa burst into loud, unstoppable laughter. She never saw spirits like these coming, and now she realizes she's got a long, hard road ahead before she even starts to understand this world. The master can't help but get curious. What's the deal with the two other ghosts Kohaku is bound to through her contract? At this point, there was nothing left to nitpick, so the woman finally dropped her dragon aside and strode up to the Tamer standing right in front of her. She thrusts her hand out with a bright smile, inviting the protagonist straight into the Tamer's guild. This was the first spark that could finally light up the boy's dream. Then they dragged him straight to the guildmaster's room. Because every guildmaster in the other kingdom was a man, her room surely couldn't be stuffed with toys, cute decorations, or sweet little scents like this yet. Even Kohaku couldn't help getting thrown off by the sheer difference between men and women. Toa suddenly popped up, shoved a snack into their hands, and told them to talk then. He just stared, totally thrown off by how stunning the master was. It was the first time a woman had shown him real kindness. It warmed what little spirit he had left. She clocked it instantly, then teased him, telling him not to get nervous, swear she wouldn't bite, even if Crush might then. Kohaku realized the joke hit a little too close to home, and the tension went razor thin. The protagonist goes rigid as Toa laughs right in his face like she's got him by the nerves every single time. She always laughs with the same unshaken face. And it's almost scary, because you can't even tell if the master's joking or dead serious. Toa didn't have to wait long before she spotted the cookies disappearing. Ghosts were snatching them up. Kohaku even apologized for their gluttony, but Toa just smiled, happy her treats were being eaten. Before they could even get a bite, everything was snatched and devoured in a single, terrifying second. Sophia even popped up like a secret agent and offered a tiny stash of the cookies she'd been hiding away. The moment the boy bites into them, he lights up and blurts out that they're absolutely delicious. After they finally breathed easy, they got down to the real issue. Toa slips a. He thrust the envelope toward the Tamer, and the poor guy just stared, completely baffled. After they told him to crack it open, Kohaku swings it open and spots a brooch staring back at her. It was the kind of proof that straight up stamped him as an official member of the guild. What threw him off was the bronze brooch. Shouldn't it be above iron, the lowest rank? The master then steps in, explaining that he managed to crush his opponent during the duel. So yeah, she made a rare exception for him, letting him start a bit higher than everyone else. For 7 brutal years, Kohaku prowled from guild to guild, hunting for a way to get registered. Everyone lined up with the same cold answers, brushing off his words and doubting his right to speak. They swore ghosts were just make-believe, then turned on him and called him a liar. Now it hit him. Every grueling year he poured into this finally paid off. In the end, everything he did all traces back to the words his father left him. If he hadn't spoken those words back then, there's no way he'd ever made it this far. Hearing that, Toa shot a look at Kohaku and demanded he accept the brooch with honor. She shut down every complaint about her decision before it could even start. And just like that, the tears burst out of him. He burst into tears, and it sent shockwaves through the spirits all around him. They had zero idea how to calm him down, so the master stepped in and soothed him themselves. Toa let him sob until his chest finally loosened, like she was giving his broken heart room to breathe. Later, he finally snapped out of it, calmed down, and apologized for the chaos he'd caused. Claire snaps that the woman keeps rubbing her master's head non-stop, while Fenrir just shrugs and insists it's actually a good thing. Oaku. Thanks for the attention still. He can't help it. He feels way too embarrassed about getting spoiled so much. That said, the woman demanded the young man freeze for just a moment. She closes in, and that's when she steals his focus again. But right at the last second, she steps back and dares him to look in the mirror. Soon, the Tamer finally clocked that that brooch he got now sat pinned to his clothes, like it was daring the world to notice him. Their spirits lifted as soon as they saw it. Now, he could finally take missions. He just had to hit the reception desk first. Once Kohaku bowed her thanks, he bolted out of the room in a flash. Saria burst into cheers and congratulated the protagonist for acing the exam. The attendant leans in and spills the real details about the guild beyond the basics. There were all kinds of missions, searching, gathering, and even hunting demons to wipe them out. And with the bronze brooch in hand, you could track things down, collect what you needed, and smash those weak demons. Those iron brooches weren't made to battle monsters like that. Meanwhile, the protagonist is grinning because more work is coming, one job after another. Kohaku doesn't head straight to hunt demons. She dives into collecting first and goes searching. More missions meant more people were counting on him, and he went all in to help every single one who needed saving. And that hit Saria so hard, it drags up a memory she thought she'd buried years ago. Before, the bronze members were nothing but greedy. But this young man standing right in front of her was a whole different monster. Still, she beams and nods, because Kohaku's kindness is impossible to miss while the protagonist clocks that Saria looked crushed just a moment ago. Her face snaps back to normal almost instantly. The attendant ushers him to the board, where they can pick the requests they want. Once you hit gold rank and up, you could snatch missions straight from the counter. Anyone below that had to hunt them down on the board. They tackled missions left and right, snatching herbs, hauling iron from the mines, hunting for horses, cracking a lily spider colony, and then wiping out 10 goblins. The protagonist decides to take the herb one, and Saria rushes in, guiding him straight to the reception desk. Meanwhile, Toa got fresh reports on Kohaku and the second he saw. The mission was that simple. A smug smile split across his face. She's praying the young man stays safe and makes it through his journey okay. The instant Kohaku steps into the forest, he orders his spirits to scramble for every herb they can find, because those plants are the key ingredients for the medicines they're about to make. Claire had no clue how they'd even find them. Everything around was nothing but grass, and then, all of a sudden, Sophia could pinpoint the perfect place before anyone else even knew where to look. Right in the middle of the path, the tamer jabs a finger at the blazing red grass and says, "This is the herb we've been hunting." The fire spirit lunged to snatch it right away, but Kohaku snapped. "Fly up, grab the ones on the highest points." While she did, everyone else stayed locked in on the targets down below. Fenrir almost immediately spotted herbs that looked nothing like the rest. Sophia declares it's a top-tier herb ranked higher and far superior to the rest. The wolf beams with joy after finding it and soaking up his master's praise, while the rest lock in harder, hunting herbs like there's no tomorrow. After all that chaos, the protagonist storms back to the guild clutching everything they managed to gather. Sadia asks how the trip went. Like, even these collections can't be easy. Then Kohaku nods hard, admitting he's got way more respect now for the iron brooches that pull this off in a single day. And at last he dumps all the herbs he gathered right on the counter so the attendant can check them. Then, out of nowhere, he slams several massive bags onto the table like it was the most dramatic entrance ever. They were all from his ghost friends, the ones who'd been hauling them for him until right now. Just for a brief moment, the protagonist almost panicked until he realized the attendant was about to get buried in evaluating everything, and it would be a mountain of work. She's totally baffled like, why are there so many top-tier herbs stacked here too, and what's the point? Kohaku tries to explain it, but it's a brutal struggle because this power belongs to a friend. Sorry about that. Of course, a ghost would mess with the size. And yeah, superior herbs aren't what he asked for, so the protagonist frets, but the attendant waves it off, saying no matter what shows up, it'll be distributed properly. The top ones were impossible to tell apart from the usual junk, so honestly, dropping in a whole bag of them would have helped more than you'd think. Finally, the protagonist begs her to swap them, knowing it'll take a while to get it all done. Claire strutted with pride, because if Sophia didn't keep correcting her, none of them would have been able to work together to pull off the collections. Out of nowhere, someone storms up to the protagonist. It's a drunk, slurring insults as he rants that he'd never accept a guy like this in the guild, especially since he keeps bragging that he's a ghost tamer, even though he's really out there collecting them. Kohaku snaps back that it's no lie, because the guildmaster himself vouched for the truth, and that answer only lights a bigger fuse in the guy, especially when the protagonist calls the master by name. It was obvious this guy was totally out of it, like he couldn't even hold a real conversation. But then he snapped that they should throw everything at the fight, because their families would be the price. Kohaku reminded him it was forbidden, but the man shrugged it off like rules didn't even exist. That exact behavior is what pushes the protagonist to dig in even harder and refuse more than ever. Then the drunk slams into him, calling him a coward and daring him to produce a tamed monster. That's when Kohaku felt the ghost's rage surge, screaming for blood as they prepared to take that extra out any second. And right then, panic hits, because none of those guys even hear him beg them to stop. Before long, someone blasted the drunk right in the face and sent him flying away. But this time it wasn't one of the ghosts, it was Crush who struck. Toa's familiar, and yet he'd shrunk into a smaller form. Totally different from before, honestly. For the protagonist, it was wildly cool, because the master herself burst in, demanding to know who was stirring up trouble in her guild. She smiled sweetly, but the look in her eyes screamed anger so strong it made your stomach drop. Finally, Kohaku grabbed a breath, leaned in, and spilled every detail about what really happened. That move left the woman staring the drunk straight in the face, making it crystal clear that the boy really was tame, and if the guy had doubts, he could take it up with her directly. After Toa pushed him hard, that man got cornered into apologizing. Even Kohaku starts to shake under the pressure, because somehow those accusations still got under his skin. But the guildmaster had to make sure this never happened again. Members were forbidden to fight, period. So it was her job to squash the trouble, and even the protagonist basically admits it. The master shouldn't break the rules and start a fight, which made her shoot him a smug, irritated smile, and Kohaku instantly clammed up. When Saria finally came back, everything felt off and tense, but at least she'd wrapped up her exchange. They traded a massive pile of 100 kilos of herbs for just 10 silver coins and 5 copper sounds like a steal, but it sealed the deal. Sure enough, you could swap those low-value coins for the higher one, so when it came to herbs, 1 kilo cost 10 copper coins. They hauled in the top-tier herbs 40 kilos, packed tight, and it all landed in Kohaku's hands for just 4 gold coins. He stared, stunned, then still nodded and took the reward, because with that money, he could finally hunt down a place to crash for the night. He storms out of the guild and weaves through the city, and when Claire says she's hungry, Sophia shoots back that she's been eating non-stop ever since they left. She even admits she's packing on weight. Then she picks another fight with the spirit, and the protagonist just lets out a sigh, saying he'd let Claire eat more once they finally find a place to sleep. Meanwhile, he turns to Sophia and demands she draw a map and track down a cheap inn. He darts to the corner and points out the place, charging 50 coppers, a night breakfast and dinner included. In the end, that city still kept it affordable and totally standard, nothing fancy, just a fair price that everyone could live with. Kohaku finally gives in, decides to go there herself, and heads straight for the place everyone's talking about. The moment he stepped in, a kid at the entrance popped up and quizzed him. How many nights was he planning to stay? She can't make the math work. How many days could 10 silver coins buy? Until an older woman strides up to her mother and tells her the truth. It was 20 nights. She throws out a heartfelt apology, then leans in and asks, "What's your name?" Finally, she grabs her daughter, Frederica, and orders her to lead the guest straight to his room. The second Kohaku steps into the room. He hands his clothes to Sophia like clockwork, and Claire can't resist teasing her for not getting all up in the smell of them like she used to. While they bicker, the protagonist flashes a smile and steals a glance out the window. He still remembers everyone in the city who treated him right, people who showed him real kindness. The protagonist plans to hit the iron mine first thing in the morning, then slide into an elimination run right after if there's still time left. Claire tells him that if he takes the second request, she wants the next target to be something with bones. The two keep chatting through the whole night, laughing and cutting up like they can't get enough. Meanwhile, 2 men lean in and whisper about the ghost Tamer who just crashed into the city. One of them, Asur, couldn't wait to meet him. The very next day, Kohaku dashed off to claim the iron mining mission. The boy decided to head straight for the raisin mine because Sophia had told him last night that the iron there was way better. Saria nodded, even as Panic gnawed at her because they were short on quality iron, and that mine was so far out it would swallow up 5 whole days just to reach it. Traveling doesn't scare the protagonist at all, it fuels him even harder. Once he learns about the scarcity, he realizes his efforts can't wait anymore. With that, Saria had nothing left to say. She shut her mouth and the silence hit like a final punch. He said that, and he immediately nodded along with his request. Back at the inn, the protagonist leaned in and told Frederica he'd have to bolt for a bit, and when they told her to cook food for his journey, she didn't even gripe, she just went for it. To his shock, the protagonist actually demanded 28 portions. It felt like too much to ask. He was about to cross the entire world to reach the other side. Kohaku tells her everything will be fine since the food will last 3 days. Then the girl dashes off to grab her father's answer first. When she comes back, Frederica drops the news there'll be extra charges, but they can still work it out so the portions don't shrink. And after a solid round of calculating the amounts, she blunders into the wrong result again. And right when her mother shows up, she steps in to set everything straight. Then the next morning, Fenrir's help made the trek to the raisin mines take the 2 hours everyone expected. The wolf and the maid swear up and down that there's zero suspicious stuff hiding inside. Claire thrusts her power forward, ignites the path, and clears the way for them to move on. After a while on foot, you won't even notice it. You'll hit the mining site fast. Sophia kicks off the detection field, and while she does, Kohaku and Fenrir dig like crazy. Then the other two dump the iron ore into the bag. The group jumps into work, and before long the protagonist realizes this is brutal and it's way harder than they expected. Meanwhile, the wolf spirit was bursting with joy, so it practically pushed him to do everything faster. Still, he scolds himself for even thinking that, because he's the master and it's his job to help them. Before anyone could blink, all 4 bags of ore were stuffed to the brim, and at this breakneck pace, it would all be ready by tomorrow. All because everyone teamed up and pushed together. Sophia snaps that something's coming at them. They weren't part of the Tamer's Guild at all, but when they stepped forward, you could tell these weren't just any fighters. These were dangerous, powerful warriors. The protagonist can't stop thinking who in the world could be standing there. A crew of men suddenly burst into the scene, and their faces lit up with shock when they realized other people were already there too. Cole, one of them, had already fired off his detection magic and confirmed there was nobody around. Still, they finally tracked down a quiet boy hiding in the cave, and Kohaku's eyes snapped to the leader's chest, where that brooch sat shaped like something from the Battle Guild. Its color looked painfully dark, almost like silver, and the Tamer snapped to the fact he'd been staring way too long, panic spiking in his chest. He doesn't snap, he apologizes for startling him, then admits they were there to mine. He even asked them to split some of the iron with him. Kohaku spots a stash piled up in the corner and tells them they can just grab it. Meanwhile, the spirits were throwing them off, so they snapped, furious that their chaos kept wrecking the work. Everyone blinked in shock. Those guys pulled with high purity ores, and the protagonists had zero issue letting them keep that same level. The leader shoots back a huge thank you for the help and then offers to repay the favor in a big way. Or maybe they could jump in and help him some other way right there. At that moment, right then, the Tamer clocks the grin on the guy's face. But it's all wrong. Like a smile hiding something sinister. It hits him like a punch to the gut, Guildmaster's old warning ringing in his head. He'd eventually cross paths with someone from the Battle Guild, and to watch his step. Those guys have short fuses, so when the heat rises, he has to stay ice cold. And if things start to go sideways, he doesn't argue, he bolts. Because they'll step in and help him. Remembering this, Kohaku sucks in a shaky, deep breath, begging herself not to panic. He hesitates for a moment, then tells the other guy thanks for the offer, but he's good for now. Those ghosts were clawing to smash that guy, and the second scene hit, it yanked his focus away. The leader chuckles and says, "If I ever need anything later, I'll just swing by the Battle Guild of Alex." And finally, he steps up and introduces himself, Asher, and says, "Just call him, because they'll listen." "You old," pulls back. Straws and leaves swirled past him. And just like that, the protagonist finally exhaled, safe for the moment. Thank goodness it didn't turn into a fight. But I can't shake the question. Why did that one conversation leave him feeling drained and wiped out? Meanwhile, Asher leans in and demands, "Did Cole spot the badge on that kid's jacket? It looked like a bronze badge from the Tamer's Guild, at least. That's what they could tell." An insane rumor about this guild started spreading like wildfire, about how they finally tracked down the ghost tamer. One of the men is completely stunned because stuff like that is supposed to be nothing but a myth. The leader's eyes snapped to the boy, because there was no doubt he really was from the Tamer's Guild. And worst of all, he had nobody familiar beside him. No tamer can ignore requests once a familiar hears them. It tells his gut. And that's why he believed this guy was the one from the rumor. There was no proof of it, and his colleague urged him to question the boy because the sewer's refusing to say anything. So he leaned in, burning with curiosity to see how this would play out. Go on, because even now, they had zero clue how long Kohaku would keep fighting in that place. Still, there was one more shot, one wild chance they could help him down the road. The very next day, he was still standing there, and his spirits were burning bright at full throttle. Fenrir kept digging until his master couldn't stop praising him so much that Sophia snapped and said he was getting spoiled way too much. In the end, Kohaku threw all his worries aside and just wanted to make everyone feel at ease. The wolf didn't even take a minute before he blared the news something huge had torn open a massive hole. When they went to investigate, they uncovered it, an actual doorway leading to a whole other place. Back then, the tamer swore they'd hit the ceiling, yet that limit still stretched way ahead like a nightmare that refused to stop. Now that they'd hauled in most of the iron, the protagonist couldn't stop himself. He was dying to go check out that mysterious new area. The second they stepped inside, they stared into a cave so massive it felt unreal. Right as they kept moving, they spotted something right at the top, bam, just like that. It grabbed their attention, even though he couldn't believe his ghosts had his back. That knowledge still sent nerves crawling through him. Because what if this protection turns into something dangerous? Sophia said that since they'd finally made it here, they'd probably just stirred it awake. And Kohaku was already freaking out, wondering what on earth they'd awakened. Out of nowhere, the whole world started to violently shake. From the very heart of the ceiling, a monster burst out like it had been waiting for its cue. That spider monster was absolutely foul, like a nightmare with legs. Before long, the group outside the cave sensed it. Whatever had gone silent just woke up, and it was coming for trouble. Right then, Asur and his crew burst into the area, staring in disbelief, because they couldn't figure out how Kohaku had somehow reached that spot in just one single day. Honestly, he should have seen it coming. His whole behavior screamed it was obvious. No matter how many ores one person can scoop up alone, it can't add up to anything close to that. And the fact Cole never picked up on him? That screams familiarity. Asur was dead wrong to think one day wouldn't matter, because if there was even a sliver of a chance that Tamer had to face the demons, even with his familiar backing him up, there was no way he could beat them. So the crew charged straight to the ready-made battleground, fists up, about to throw down, and they couldn't stop praying that the boy was safe because. But the second they stepped in, the demon was already crushed and gone. The ghosts handled everything in the blink of an eye, like it was effortless. Sophia even joked that Claire should have been made into spider food, and Kohaku had to step in and tell them to knock it off. That's when he whirled around and spotted Asur standing right beside Cole and Round. The protagonist couldn't stop thinking, when the heck did those guys show up here? And the leader leaned in and told him straight, "We're not here to take you down, but that demon who?" That very morning they uncovered it. The powers that be stamped the place a danger zone. So Asur's crew got the brutal job of wiping out the creature, and Sophia broke it down for everyone. Danger zones are spots hunters with detection abilities call out as too risky to approach, right near volcanic eruptions in rushing rivers that won't let anyone pass, and on islands hammered by lightning storms. This is where demons slip into our world. It sounds like a lame excuse, but Kohaku never imagined Asur could push him this far. Then he realized the truth. The protagonist had a lively ghost wolf that dug all night long. So in the end, it was a boy who stepped up to face the danger, and the adventurer even bowed and apologized, while Kohaku finally understood the truth. Leaving Fenrir to carry everything by himself was a real problem, and he swallowed hard and admitted it was because he dug too deep, like, maybe they should just look the other way. Because he was desperate to sit with everything that just happened. Asher realized, just like his gut told him, that he truly was the tamer of ghosts. There was no point hiding it anymore. The rumors had spread like wildfire. The protagonist was stunned that people actually talked about it, and it all began the night before when they caught him alone in there. Earlier, his clothes even carried a Hunter Guild badge, yet no familiar trailed beside him. It only hit harder once he finally saw the power crushing the demon right in front of him. It was obvious this fight wasn't fought with fists or eyes. It was a battle against forces he couldn't even see. In the end, Kohaku finally swallowed her pride and admitted Asura was right about everything he'd said. Right then, the guy's mood flipped to pure joy as he lifted his hands up. Asher couldn't even breathe. He actually found someone worthy of legend. Once more, the boy stepped up and introduced himself, claiming he was a swordsman from the Battle Guild. Those two standing beside him came from the same crew, Cole the mage, and Rowan the fighter. So the four of them exchanged super polite, formal greetings, like they were about to step into something big. Kohaku was still stunned to watch that silver badge make it so far, and the Battle Guild's crew turned out to be absolute beasts. Cole and Rowan even laughed, because seeing all those details in a dark place must have been brutal. But turns out that group was ranked in Mithril. The protagonist couldn't stomach what he'd done, snapped into a full apology for how rude he'd been, and then, no, it wasn't that he just didn't care. He meant to tell him sooner or later. Instead of that, the leader pulled the protagonist into the Battle Guild, promising a juicy annual salary of 50 platinum coins. If he wanted to join, he could even swear he'd get his own mithril badge. And yeah, every single request he completed meant one thing. He got paid for it. After an agonizing stretch of silence, Kohaku finally choked out an apology, but the real reason he showed up? Toa recognized him on sight and in the guild. There are others who want you back, ready to welcome you with open arms. Even with everything crashing down, the protagonist refused to quit on that promise. He just wouldn't walk away. Asher fires back. It's okay, those feelings mattered, then pauses and says, "Now there's one more thing we've got to talk about." Yeah, the demon they call the Death Spider didn't just have a body. It was forged out of crackling magical crystals. Kohaku can't stop wondering if magical crystals are different from magical stones, so Cole leans in and explains that stone is demon magic turned solid, and when the demon died, its power seeped out and crystallized into that crystal. With a magical crystal this huge, it should be packed with thousands of spells, and Roan says you'd better grab as much of it as you can. Since Kawaku was the one who took down the creature, hauling it back could pay a fortune, or forge a brand new magical weapon. The squad retreats again, and Cole blurts out that their leader really was a disaster. Then he reveals Aser wasn't just waiting around, he was probing Kohaku, checking whether that kid cared more about money and fame than anything else, and based on how he answered, he knew this was proof he wasn't just talking. He was living by his heart. His coworkers lean in and demand, "So what would you've done if you'd said yes to that offer?" The leader muses that he might have needed to kneel and lick his master's boots just to get into the guild, and Cole even cracks a joke that Asur totally seemed like he'd fallen for it, and the boy nods instantly. He just can't resist seeing that power up close again. On the other hand, he wasn't chasing a paycheck either. Claire just kept digging, demanding to know why he was doing all of this in the first place. Kohaku suddenly remembers the words his father handed him, and he blurted out that he only wanted to become strong and fearless. "Hold up, save this, just keep it sincere, something along those lines." Right after that, the protagonist burst back at the guild and Saria snapped to attention. At the same time, she bolted over to see if the boy was okay right after the. Just 2 days earlier, they'd gotten word of a demon roaming the mine, and that was why everything was happening. It's the 3rd day since Kohaku stormed out, and Saria's spiraling with non-stop worry, because the boy should have been back safe in the middle of the trip, right? Then the truth hits, and the protagonist snaps his face away. The protagonist snaps his face away the second he realizes he has to confess that one dangerous thing. The attendant nearly choked when they realized the protagonist was the one who killed the death spider. But in the end, it wasn't him at all. It was his ghosts. And Saria still can't make sense of any of it. That wasn't even the real problem. She let out a breath of relief knowing the Tamer was alive, because out there, the hunters live with danger breathing down their necks. That's why they kept leveling up their instincts, training to feel danger coming before it ever hit. The moment they sensed danger, they had to bolt fast and put their lives first. The attendant shoots him a regretful look, apologizing for the anger he sparked earlier. But deep down, she couldn't stomach the thought of watching another hunter get killed. In the end, Kohaku leans in and sincerely thanks her for thinking of everything. Those words shattered her again, and the tears poured harder than ever. He wiped Saria's tears aside, clenched his resolve, and then sprinted into the plan craft a magical weapon by grabbing only what he needed from the mined materials and dumping the rest back into the guild. The protagonist digs up the iron and fires up the magical crystals he brought along, only to find the sheer amount he packed is what really blows his mind. Every single item looked top tier, and Saria nearly gasped at how sharp Kohaku was, because checking everything would take way more than 2 hours. So for the moment, that kid was finally free. Sophia tells you about Flamen, a blacksmith town with one legend at its center. Zakis, the blacksmith everyone swears is the best in the whole country. Plus, that magical weapon is packed with power, but you've got to pick the right option first. Kohaku knows the only way it'll actually help is if they pick the right one. So after crunching the growth rate and other key factors, the employee decides a hand sword is the best bet. After that, the whole crew tore off to Blacksmith Town, Flamlin, where the flames and steel always roar. Claire can't stop smiling because the whole place is buzzing and alive, and they absolutely love stepping into places that buzz with insane energy. Still, they stumble on a packed crowd and rush in to see what everyone's staring at. Then Sophia lifts the moment into chaos right in front of them. A magical weapon reveals itself. The boy gripped a sword so sharp, it felt like it could cut the night in half. Then the story kept going, and it was only the beginning of his wild fate. Slammed hard into the wooden stump, the attack seared the surface wide open, no magic needed at all. Kohaku's eyes lit up. She couldn't believe how savage the magical weapon's power was. Claire even says she could do it, but Sophia shoots back that the spirit was basically a flying insect. After their fight, the protagonist snaps that they need to find Zack right now. Right in the middle of the crowd, The man snaps around the second he hears the boy say that name. A little later, Kohaku burst up to the home of the legendary blacksmith. Claire could see the place lay in ruins, but the protagonist treated it like pure magic. So he strides up, pounds on the door, praying the blacksmith is home. No answer comes. But Sophia can still feel someone watching from inside. At least the door wasn't locked, so the tamer pushed in, straight up asked for permission, and stepped inside. And then, out of nowhere, something streaks past his head and slams into the wall right beside him. That axe missed him by a hair's breadth, so close, it felt like it would slice his life in half. A man scowling like thunder shoots a furious question at them. "What do you want here?" Kohaku blurts that he came to request a weapon, then steps up and introduces himself to the man. Again, the guy's fury erupts, and he slams his bottle down on the table with a brutal crash. He asks if that kid's really a hunter, and the second Kohaku nods yes. The man snaps back and rips into him with the meanest insults imaginable. Yeah, that was Zacchus the blacksmith, but he shut his mouth tight and refused to talk at all. Zack has hated hunters way harder than I ever could. More than anything, it hurls itself at the protagonist again, lunging with raw, relentless force. He's trapped, so he sprints for his life and ducks into shelter behind. Hiding behind the defensive barrier Sophia conjured, Claire bursts out, calling that guy ignorant and brutish to his face. Kohaku wasn't raging at all. She looked crushed, like her depression hit harder than any anger ever could, and it has his ghosts fretting nonstop, scrambling to cheer him up. In the end, they still ended up hitting a bar in the city, even after they got thrown out, and the protagonist pushed through it all because he was desperate to get that blacksmith to forge his magical weapon. After getting rejected, the boy crumpled into heartbreak, completely crushed. But he couldn't figure out why Zacchus hated hunters so much then. A guy slid in next to Kohaku and asked if he was a customer of that blacksmith in town. This guy could tell the protagonist had been driven off after he ran into Zacchus just a little earlier. Katori says, "Let it go," telling Kohaku to stop chasing that arrogant guy. And Kohaku replies that she's heard Zacchus is the best in the whole country, but even the country's top blacksmith would swear his swords were the best, and back then, one sword cost a platinum coin. The protagonist blinked in shock, but the truth was, he was dying to get a look at those blades. Still, that guy wrecked every single item up for sale so hard and so fast, the tamer nearly choked on his own drink from the shock. He wanted answers so badly, but the truth came with a price, so Kohaku handed Katori a gold coin and demanded the full story. The guy demanded the protagonist keep quiet about where he got that info. And then, boom, this old blacksmith's got a son. So Katori presses him and asks how old Kohaku is. The boy says he turned 20 this year. And that hits the other guy hard now. He's just standing there, lost in thought. Chances are the blacksmith's son was the same age if he were still alive, that is. The boy died 3 years ago. Zacchus's son, Dacus, snatched the divine role of swordsman at 13 and threw himself into the battle guild as a hunter. Right from the start, the old blacksmith refused to hear it, dug his heels in hard because this kind of work always had death lurking right over your shoulder. They bickered nonstop day and night, until Dacus finally stormed out of the house after yet another brutal fight. Ever since, Zack has been living on the edge of horror, reading the newspapers every day just to catch the next list of the dead until the day finally hit. Dacus's name was the one stamped on that paper. They hauled his body back later that day. But the real story didn't revolve around that at all. A blade had slammed into his son's body, proof another human had torn him away. In that instant, Zacchus realized the truth. It wasn't an accident. It was a hunter. Because the blade that murdered Dacus wasn't some random weapon. It was one Zacchus himself forged. Kohaku couldn't process what he'd just heard. His brain just refused to accept it. As blacksmiths, they could never mix up the swords they forged with their own hands. What Katori was trying to ram into our heads with this whole story, what was the message really saying? It was a desperate plea begging him to finally give up, because once his son became a hunter, another hunted him down, and then things only got worse above. Zacchus is convinced he thinks he's the one who killed his son, and the rage he feels won't let him let go. Ever since that moment, the man can't lift his hammer again. Next day, Claire grilled her master, asking if he truly believed every rumor he'd heard. And while Kohaku still didn't have a clue, the moment they got back to the guild he could finally go see Usher. The spirit can't forget that cheerful guy. Maybe he holds answers to all this. because the group might have rolled back from the mine just a few hours after the danger warning went out. The protagonists clenched their fists and realized there had to be a way to slash the distance. Later, back at the Tamer's Guild, the payout was huge, so they couldn't just toss the money at Kohaku through the front desk. Saria brought him straight into the reception room. She thrust a platinum coin into his hand, along with 80 gold coins. Then someone slammed another chunk of money down in front of him. That number was the magical crystal conversion value, turning them into real money in the marketplace at 1 gold per kilogram, so the whole payout matched perfectly. The attendant cranks the chaos into neat bundles and shoves them into the protagonist's hands. Then the young man just stands there, totally stunned, like he has zero clue what to do with all that money. But right now wasn't the moment to stress over that. So, yeah, he still has to hit the battle guild. Kohaku jumps up and bolts out as fast as he can, and he doesn't even clock that the attendant is still mid-speech about the payments. At the battle guild, Tamer burst in running hard. Thank goodness he made it on time. Still, even from a distance, Kohaku could smell cigarettes and alcohol hanging in the air, and the whole time, everyone in that place kept slamming into fights over and over. So he can't help but wonder, could he even find Asher in a place like this? Then bam, a voice interrupts, saying the protagonist looks awfully familiar. That hooded creep starts pitching something sketchy, and Sophia shoots back that it's just sugar. He was about to get Kohaku scammed, but the moment Kohaku hears it, he shuts him down fast. Meanwhile, one guy leans in and tells the other, then jabs his finger straight at him. They clocked it right away. The kid who just walked in was from the Tamer's Guild. The protagonist knew he couldn't last much longer at this pace, and he was about to march up to the receptionist, but then he got stopped cold by voices laughing and chatting nearby. Everyone was buzzing about the bronze Tamer, rumors swirling so hard that people couldn't stop staring while Kohaku tried to shake it off, insisting he definitely wasn't the guy. Right then, a hunter shows up and snaps, "You lost." And before he even waits for an answer, he offers to escort him home, demanding everything in his bag in return. The guys clearly had one plan to rob him, and the protagonist felt the tension spiral, like the air itself was getting worse by the second. But his ghosts were right on the edge of launching into action, one heartbeat away from blowing all of them flying. If he didn't stop them, his reputation would nosedive even harder, so the protagonist rushed in, insisting he only wanted to talk to a specific person there, and he refused to trouble the others. So the hunters burst into laughter like that was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. No one in that place could stand the thought of talking to a Tamer. While they kept provoking Kohaku, someone slid in from the shadows slowly, steadily, like trouble on the move. And it was a seer and his crew rolling in together, visibly annoyed that he'd bothered their colleague. With their visitor causing chaos, the others couldn't just sit back. They demanded to know exactly what was going on. Kohaku didn't even have to lift a finger. His presence was so terrifying it sent the men provoking her scattering. A sewer gurgles up and slams into the scene, and they immediately scramble back off. He beamed, thrilled that the protagonist finally came to see him, and the Tamer, still shaking with relief, finally broke down, crying tears that he'd been holding back all this time. A little while later, the whole crew squeezed into a private room to talk, and Cole let out a heavy sigh, complaining that the battle guild's gotten worse with time. Ashur said he'd report what happened to the master later, then ordered his partner to track down the names of the guys who messed with them earlier. They zero in on Kohaku's conversation, digging for the real reason he even came to town, and the young man says it was some guy named Akias who died 3 years ago. After that tense pause, the group leader snaps, telling the mage to slam soundproof magic onto the room. Kohaku finally spills every last detail of the blacksmith and what really happened, and he had to know if they, by any chance, recognized what kind of person that dead hunter really was. Because Dakis is the one who remembers and makes it stick. If he were still alive, he'd have had the chance to rise into mithril ranks territory like the rest of the hunters. Above all, he was fearless and bursting with life. Everyone adored him, and that definitely included Asur and his crew too. But no matter what, Dakis always felt like he was sprinting through life with no brakes. Ron nods along. Sure, the kid just wants to get stronger, but he still wastes his days digging up bronze ore. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could someone like him get betrayed by another hunter? Even Asur could feel it in the air, like Kohaku was thinking the same crushing truth right now. They sent a crew of 5, including that hunter, to rip apart a whole organization. It was a crew called the Gurenkai, a secret the main character had never even heard of until this moment. And that's exactly why. It's because Gurenkai was a shadowy underworld crew, one that never showed its face in public. They worshipped the burning spirit like it was sacred fire itself. Every month, they snatch kids around 15, drag them into their ritual, and burn them alive. Right then, every single ghost locked in on the same truth: this spirit had to be Claire. She snaps back fast, shutting the whole idea down. There's no way she'll ever accept a cult like that. Gurenkai somehow went rogue on its own. When the hunters came for them, they didn't get destroyed. Reports said they vanished and bolted the moment the chase started. With Dacus watching their backs, there was no way they could have failed, yet the boys still got betrayed. Or at least, it wasn't a simple betrayal, because every single member of Daki's team was straight out of Gurenkai. 4 brutal wounds tore into the young man's body from that surprise attack right after the hunter got wiped out from the front. Because that strike was the one that finished him, Kohaku fires back, asking when they discovered who those people really were. And Asura tells her it happened about 6 months after the whole incident. At last, he closes the distance and steps a little nearer to the protagonist. He leaned in, admitting that this was all they had. Then his eyes narrowed, begging to know if there was anything else you could ask him. The Tamer shakes his head, insists it isn't true, and thanks them for sharing the whole story with him. Zakis was the only one who knew about the incident before it finally hit the news that Gurenkai caused it, and you'd think someone from the guild would have rushed to tell the blacksmith the truth. But he shut everyone out and refused to listen. The misunderstanding kept piling up, so yeah, that's exactly why his hatred for hunters burned so fiercely. Sophia leans in and asks whether her master plans to finally tell Zakis what's going on. Kohaku nods and says he'd do it in a heartbeat, if only it were truly possible. Because pulling it off isn't exactly easy, but the phantasm swears that there are. You've got just one shot to make this happen. Then the crew pushed into the lands south of the Brahmin kingdom, where ghosts haunted every step. Claire kept blasting them back, one after another, but the attacks just wouldn't stop until Sophia snapped the truth. The ghosts are driven by pure instinct to kill the living, and that constant slaughter riles up the fire spirit, especially because the maid is doing absolutely nothing. Instead, she keeps poking the phantasm again and again with her cutting, sarcastic comments. That just spikes Claire's rage. Then she blasts out even heavier firepower with her energy. Then boom, the blast hit so hard it vaporized every monster in one single strike. Thanks to their hard work, the ground suddenly felt crystal clear from where they stood. But the moment a presence ripped out of the heart of the forest, they knew it was exactly what they'd been hunting for. So you'd end up with the item that remains after you finally defeat the strongest ghost demon, the Lich. People swear it's immortal, but that kind of thing doesn't belong in this world, so all they can do is hand it to Fenrir and watch it end in an instant. Sophia already told Kohaku how the ghost's magic stone works, and that's why. Because people would have called our hero a hypocrite or shrugged and said none of this was his problem. But he couldn't stand there doing nothing while people were suffering right in front of him. That's why he and his crew charged straight for the Lich. Much later, he finally walked away, leaving everything in the wolf's hands. Kohaku grills Sophia about the Lich's weakness, and Sophia snaps back. The only target that matters is its head. Liches claw their way into immortality by hoarding deadly knowledge. So if you smash the source of that power, their reign ends for good. Right then, they stared straight at the most horrifying thing on earth. Fenrir didn't hesitate. He slammed the Lich down, while Kohaku froze in shock, and Sophia just smiled, finally satisfied. Even though the wolf grumbles that the Lich has zero flavor to bite, everything still goes smoothly right back to business as usual. They snagged the magic stone they'd been hunting for. The protagonist turns back and thanks every single ghost that helped him, like each one just saved his life. Now they could finally rush back to Zakis's house and settle this mess for good. Once they show up right as they arrive. They track down that man right there in front of his son's grave. Kohaku blurts that she's heard of Dacus, and her heart aches for his loss. But the blacksmith snaps that he wants nothing from any hunter, and demands to be left alone. Claire clocks that the man feels totally different now, and the protagonist yells at everyone to hold up right there. Then he steps up and admits, "I know I'm being annoying with this," but he can't walk away. because Zacchus looks like he's barely holding it together, and he's clearly suffering. At that exact moment, the man rocketed forward and smashed a punch straight into his face. The blacksmith rips into the question. What could anyone possibly know about how his son felt in his final breath? No boy could ever truly fathom the raw, heart-shattering agony of losing a child. That's the kind of hunter who just turned their backs on him and walked away, doing nothing at all. Just as Zacchus swings in for another hit, Kohaku snaps into action and throws up his guard. As expected, the protagonist heard him admit it. His son wasn't killed, he was abandoned. So the blacksmith finally pieced together the full truth in time, revealing who really killed Zacchus. Death. Then the man finally lets go of him right as the words about to finish spill out, stammering out. It's just what I meant to say. He's still seething at the hunters, and then it hits him back when he begged Acer to deliver a sword to his son, the one who would grow up to be a swordsman, and he prayed that his kid never learned it was his father who handed it to him. Asher nodded and agreed, and the blacksmith's heart instantly sank because in that single moment, his own son died, trapped around the worst, most horrifying people imaginable. The protagonist admits it. Yeah, some of the hunters are straight up awful, but not all of them. Those words hit Zacchus like lightning, and he can't help thinking of his son. When Zacchus blurted that he'd turn into a swordsman thanks to his divine calling, he still, and even then, his father stepped up and offered to train him as a blacksmith. So what does he do? He snaps, loses it, and screams for his son to shut up and stop spouting nonsense. Zacchus snapped back, and the confidence in his voice made it clear. This wasn't nonsense at all. Those words hit him like a reminder of Kohaku's voice, her exact way of saying things, sharp and powerful. The protagonist says he heard Zacchus is adored by everyone in their guild, but the kids never stopped rushing, always chasing after power. The reason for it was a mystery nobody had ever cracked, not even his own father. Right after the Tamer showed off the Lich's magic stone, holding it meant someone who'd lost a loved one could briefly summon their soul back. Zacchus didn't even have to ask, he knew exactly why his son was rushing, but if he wanted, he could use it to say whatever he wanted instead. The blacksmith could already taste the regret that would hit him the moment he finally heard how his son died. If he named his soul, could he really reach it again? And would it actually answer him? Then the man grabbed the ghost stone and yanked Zacchus's spirit back into the world. The boy was stunned when he suddenly fought his way back to consciousness right then. At that exact moment, Zacchus crumpled to his knees, pleading for forgiveness for ignoring his son's words back then. He tore himself up for never showing up when he mattered, and for failing to shield him when it counted. The boy strode up and snapped back, saying it was him who owed the apology. Zacchus always chased his own path, and then fate slammed him down. Before he could ever outlive his father, even the blacksmith knew deep down that this wasn't his son's doing. Finally, he demanded to know why that kid had chosen the life of a swordsman. Zacchus finally confessed that he'd always longed to be just like his father, because every weapon he forged was ranked among the very best in the entire world. But his divine calling wasn't healing or judging, it was wielding a blade. And that's when everything clicked in his mind. No matter how hard he pushed, he just couldn't close the gap and reach him. Then Zacchus suddenly saw a way to step up and support his divine profession. His father's magical weapons were forged from nothing but the top-tier stuff iron, rare ores, and pure magic stones. Every material picked to craft the deadliest blades possible. Zacchus always said yes to mining requests. That was the whole reason he kept going, because the more experience he racked up and the stronger he grew, the farther he could push into deadly places to pull out the best materials. Then, out of nowhere, his dream ignited. His father would finally forge the world's greatest sword, built from the materials he gathered completely alone. Zacchus leaned in and spoke straight to the protagonist. He knew it was a huge ask, but he still went for it. He begged Kohaku to help turn his dream into reality. Sophia pointed out that the boy could see his ghost as clearly as if it stood right in front of him. Claire was grinning like she just hit the jackpot because this could be the perfect chance ever since the start. Kohaku had been pushing for a sword made by Zacchus, and when the blacksmith finally heard the truth, he couldn't believe it. The Tamer was actually allied with ghosts. At last, he demanded the exact same thing his son wanted, and dropped into a deep bow to the protagonist. Now it wasn't just Zacchus chasing a dream, his father had wanted it too. So when Kohaku heard that, she nodded and jumped in to help. So it happened. And before long, the spirit of the dead began to fade away. It was time to say goodbye. But Zacchus was still beaming because he finally got to chat a little. The hunter leaned in and thanked the protagonist for everything he'd done. He leaned in and begged his father for a long, blessed life, and then he said goodbye like it was the final time the world would hear it. The moment it was all finally settled, Zacchus turned to Kohaku and tore into a heartfelt apology for punching her in the face earlier, and the tamer shot back, "It's all good." Like it didn't even matter. And just like that, things finally settled into calm conversation. Then Asher showed up out of nowhere to jump into the talk too. Wait, turns out their meeting wasn't destiny at all. It was pure coincidence, until the blacksmith spilled the truth. Beaskill appear every single year on this day, because it was the anniversary of his son's death. Zacchus thanked the hunters for showing up to pay you a visit, even after the way they'd treated him with arrogance. Ashur had always stayed genuinely kind, and from the very start, he refused to blame the hunter for his son's death. Still, he stayed stubborn to the bone, and the moment he could, he snapped at them again despite everything. Even after he crawled through a sewer and his own colleagues dropped to their knees, begged for forgiveness, and even took the blame that was never theirs. The blacksmith dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness for the ruthless way he treated everyone all this time. And before he died, he made sure to personally thank them for always looking after his son. He even pulled out a lich magic stone he'd managed to get and used it to talk directly to Dacus. Cole nearly froze when he saw it, begging, "Where'd you get something like this?" Kohaku grinned and said, "I picked it up with my ghosts. They handle the monster." The whole group kept chatting while the mage was still reeling in shock, and he couldn't stop wondering what kind of person a ghost tamer even was. Zacchus would still head back to his workbench, while Acer's crew got dragged back to the guild. Their goodbyes hit hard, and Kohaku marched with the blacksmith all the way to his home. Asura lit up when he finally saw Zacchus looking lighter than he had in forever, and Cole nodded too, because even his leader friends felt weirdly different this time. "That's normal just a second ago." The swordsman's face cracked into pure relief, and then the sewer finally got it. Cole was right about all of this. Back at the blacksmith's place, Kohaku couldn't stop staring. Everything felt magical, like it was breathing again. And Zack had to apologize, because after all that time without using his tools, the whole place was thick with dust. While the man was still staring at his hammer on the table, Sophia shot him a comment. That's when the protagonist jabbed a finger at his maid and ordered her to take over the cleaning. Zacchus nodded, and the very next question snapped into focus: the inventory. Soon, desperation crashed over him the moment he remembered he'd sold every last bit of his materials until the protagonist finally flashed the stash he'd scored, and every single piece came back freakishly high purity, remembering his son's dream like it was yesterday. The blacksmith's resolve only hardened. Now he was determined to make it real, no matter what. Now that they'd locked in their mission to forge the greatest sword the world had ever seen. First, they had to lock in a plan, he demanded. And when he asked if Kohaku could drink, she agreed, at least a little before everything kicked off. Until the protagonist finally stopped in confusion, wondering why Zacchus had thrown that random question his way. Because it was a huge day, and surely Zacchus would let his father at least have a glass. After that answer, the tamer finally caved and agreed with him. Asur told the guildmaster that Zacchus was back at work, and the master practically lit up because he'd been stressed and worrying for ages. And Asher absolutely crushed it, because the battle guild master was none other than Leon Fleverod. The swordsman snapped back that it wasn't him who saved the blacksmith, and Leon immediately clocked who'd really come to the rescue. Not only did he kill a death spider, he also crushed a lich, and both of them were mithril-level monsters. The way those fights ended left everyone stunned. Ashura admitted it was true, and honestly, it stunned him. The master could tell the kid wasn't lying. But this was the last thing he ever expected to hear. Right now, he was locked in. Finding that boy later was the only thing on his mind. The legendary tamer still had him stunned like, how was someone even real? Especially when Leon carried around that book of heroic tales like it was his secret weapon. Meanwhile, Kohaku handed the remaining work over to Zaku and stepped back, trusting him to take it from here. Right as he was about to dive back into work, he spotted something crawling out of the fire. The fire spirit inked a message to the blacksmith, declaring it was the holy flame that would never die and swore it would share part of its power for the sake of its master. Zakis thanked Claire for being so insanely generous. Seriously, that power deserves it. And he couldn't stop thinking about how Kohaku had guided him to the answers he desperately needed. He unraveled misunderstandings he never imagined could get fixed. And that's why Zakis would throw everything he had into every task in front of him, especially for someone as important as his brand new savior. In the city, everyone stops to listen as the forge roars and the blacksmith's hammer rings non-stop. Everyone gasped when they heard Zak was back at work. The sound of his hard work finally reached everyone's ears, and it lit up their faces with pure joy. Even Katori couldn't help it. She was thrilled the blacksmith finally came back, even if he showed up a bit late. A few days later, breaking news hit. Your sword was finally ready. Sophia held up the letter that arrived from Zakis, and the protagonist practically burst with excitement. He couldn't stop fretting about the day ahead, so he started drilling his fencing moves non-stop. So the kid sprinted straight to Zakis at his workbench, ready for whatever came next. Soon, the blacksmith shoved the blade he'd been forging for days into his hands. And when he saw it, there was no doubt. This was the best sword in the world. Kohaku asked for permission, grabbed the finished thing in hand, and immediately checked what his hard work had built. Efforts paid off. Everything felt light in his hands, and the blacksmith couldn't help grinning like he just nailed the perfect job. Zakis made it to the end, knowing this was going to be the finest sword anyone could swing. Since everyone knew the hero was a tamer, not a swordsman, his job had to shape what came next. Kohaku's breath hitched, and tears burned in his eyes as he finally yanked the blade free from the sheath. A ghost raved about how razor-sharp it was and gushed over that stunning blue glow. You could tell it was a magical weapon just by staring at it. Zakis swore it cut because of his special materials, like the proof was staring you in the face. Then the blacksmith leaned in and demanded his answer. Grip his sword in both hands and lock his gaze on the stone right ahead. Right then, a sharp red line flickered into existence in front of him. The moment he shoved the blade into the line, the blade sliced the stone clean in two, and the moment hit like a thunderclap, a total shock as, with the cut landing all on its own, no effort needed. He gripped the blade and stared his opponent down, because once the sword was held up, their weakness would show, and the steel would answer everything. With this skill, even dragon scales get sliced like butter. Then Kohaku presses him and asks if he ever named the sword, and the man nods, telling how a sacred blade was forged long ago, with a legendary cutting power just like it, and they named it *Fragarak. That was the exact name of the protagonist's brand new sword. Kohaku shoots him a huge thank you and even offers him payment, but the blacksmith snaps back and refuses to take a single coin. Instead, he pushed Kohaku to do him a solid: go tell everyone that the great blacksmith is back on the job. Still moved, the protagonist drops to a bow, nodding in full agreement and thanking him again with all his heart. Zakis grabs the tamer's shoulder and tells him to dig deep and stay strong through the journey ahead. Not only to fuel his own legacy, he pushed for his son too, so the whole world would finally learn his name. Later, Kohaku clenched her jaw and marched to the guild to take the request and go all out in a real fight. He knew bronze rank hunters barely got any jobs, but he couldn't wait. He just wanted to put his sword through its paces right now. As he pushed toward the guild, he stopped dead right in front of him. A whole crowd swarmed together, and the moment he asked what was going on, everyone seemed to hush. Lately, Saria hadn't been feeling right. She kept sighing over and over, and even though she wasn't sick, her sadness was impossible to miss. He felt crushed. There had to be some reason for it. But the adventurers couldn't exactly ask questions, so they all huddled up, trying to figure out their next move. Sophia and Claire even cracked jokes that everybody was crazy about the receptionist, staring at her like she was their favorite person. Kohaku's gonna ask for something, but the smarter move hit her. Come back later. That's when Saria caught the protagonist's voice and snapped to it. He was standing right at the entrance. Then she suddenly shoots to her feet and yells his name, shocking everyone in the room. Saria barrels toward him, desperate to get answers for the days he vanished without a whisper after they'd waited so long. And now the adventurers finally realize why her heart is heavy. Kohaku is missing. Now, the good news lit a fire under her, and she was finally fired up. Even Claire and Saria couldn't stand it seeing those two hit it off like best friends drove them up the wall. Saria's tone of voice could have totally misled everyone and sparked the wrong impression. Kohaku blurted, So what's the good news exactly? She made sure she could project her voice so everyone could hear because this was too important to ignore. The protagonist can't help but hope this is finally the fix that clears up the whole misunderstanding. But that woman somehow has the nerve to say it's not appropriate to talk there. And Saria's mortified expression makes everything explode even worse. In the end, the protagonist had no choice. He grabbed the receptionist and dragged her straight into the reception room. He was still stuck in the crossfire of two glaring, irritated stares. Saria clocked it. Something was off, and the boy looked wiped out for some reason. Bill member. She didn't even feel guilty. She had zero clue who it was meant to be. But the Tamer leans in and demands to hear the good news. Then she slides a fresh envelope in front of him. Only this one is nothing like the ones he's seen before. Kohaku rips open the envelope and can't stop wondering what on earth was inside. The moment he opened it, a brooch snapped into view, nothing like anything he'd ever worn before. Saria blurted out her congratulations on the spot, and just like that, he became the fastest kid ever to rise to silver rank in the guild's entire history. She should have handed it to him after their last talk, but before she could, he bolted out the door. Claire and Sophia turned to their master and shower him with praise, acting like they weren't annoyed a little bit just a moment ago. The protagonist is baffled that he got promoted just for collecting and mining, and then the attendant lays it out every item he dragged in had massive value, both in quantity and quality. She clocks just how far the protagonist is from looking happy. The Tamer shoots back, saying he didn't just not deserve it. He's never felt like he was owed that kind of special treatment. Then Saria finally drops the truth: this promotion isn't special treatment at all. The boy isn't being punished at all. His hard work gets him rewarded. And it's a win for the whole guild too. Because of the rank system, every guild kept swelling with fresh recruits in the low tiers, while the real talent at the top was always in short supply. Basically, anyone who could bring bigger benefits got to climb higher, with a few special exceptions thrown in. So the protagonist couldn't help but feel proud of himself, and even prouder of his own spirit for pulling off an amazing job. After a heartbeat, Kohaku snatches. He snatches the brooch and shoots the receptionist a quick, grateful nod. But instead of taking orders from his new rank, he went hunting for a mission, any excuse to go slaughter goblins. Because the kid had never tried a subjugation mission before, he wanted to prove his sword and right when he did. Saria's curiosity kicked in, but the moment she heard the name Zakis, she went ice cold. She could barely breathe as the truth hit her: this great master craftsman had built the new creation, even though the rumors swore he'd vanished from weapon making for 3 whole years. Kohaku blurts out that everything went down at once, and then she's forced to lay out the entire story from start to finish. Now the woman finally got it, promised to keep it locked down, and still made sure the guildmaster was told. Because if anything was going to move, it had to be reported. After that, the receptionist shot off to take the boy's request to kill goblins. This time, he had to face a whole crew of 10 monsters like that hunt them through Mirazona's wild wilderness. Sophia says that this time you'll need to dress much more modestly. Mirazona was the kind of village everyone forgot, one of the poorest in the whole region, so folks figured it was safer to dress in a way that didn't draw eyes. Kohaku leans in, bids Saria a tearful goodbye, and then storms out of the guild. Soon, he burst into the village of Mirazona. According to his phantasma, it was a really humble little slum, poor through and through. The maid didn't feel a single weird thing in the air around her. Honestly, it felt like something supernatural was messing with everything. Like a phantasma was jamming your scanner and wrecking your search. The protagonist leans in and says, "Once we're done with this quest, we're investigating right away." The crew barrels forward, and Fenrir is the one who spots the trail that leads straight to the goblins. As the request said, 10 of them rolled forward together as one unstoppable group. Kohaku had never swung a sword or even touched a cutting weapon before, but if he can stay on that outline path, then he can wipe them out. Noticing his hesitation, Sophia steps in and grabs her master's attention, then offers to help. She tells him she looks just like the woman from his fight with Toabak when she blasted Crush with enchantment magic, and that's when he finally clicks. It could work the other way around too. Tamers aren't meant to stand alone. They're built to fight side by side with their servants. Only a handful of monsters can wield enchantments and magic, and when they do, everything changes. The protagonist can't stop thinking about it. He could team up and fight with every single one of his phantasmas, and he nodded along, fully agreeing with Sophia's proposal. The proposal, and the moment the fencer's enchantment hits, everything changes. The maid leans in and warns her master don't expect special attacks, because he's not a swordsman by trade. Finally, the protagonist snaps to his feet and charges straight toward the monsters. Now he finally understood exactly how to move. Learn how to move and master the way he wields that sword. And just like that, the goblins' fight ends. Boom. No more threats. Then it's over right in the blink of an eye. When he triggered the fencer's enchantment, the rush hit like lightning, and it was downright jaw-dropping. Claire and Fenrir shower Kohaku with praise, and the compliment hits him hard. Nerves spike. But gratitude bursts through. After all, it was only those three that carried him this far. All he'd ever done was hang back, silent and helpless, just watching them crash like his whole life was stuck behind his plate. With their help, he knew someday he'd stand right beside them, ready to fight together. At last, the whole crew barrels back to the village of Mirazona. As he's on the move, the wolf catches a scent. Someone's closing in. When they looked up, Aser was just there like he burst out of nowhere. He beams at Kohaku with zero warning, stunned to find him there. The boy showed up ready to explore, and the protagonist couldn't stop wondering if this place was connected to why these lands were so insanely rich. Ashura nods, smiling hard because the Tamer caught on instantly, and as a swordsman, he can't afford to relax in a place like this, the sacred land of blade masters. He'd been here a bunch of times, but never like this, never anything this wild, so he rushed to the village Mirazona, desperate to find out everything about what just happened. The protagonist shoots back that he's here for the same reason too, so Azur grins and invites him to go together. Still, his curiosity wouldn't let up or had to find out everything about that new magical weapon the boy just got. Just like Zakis always delivers, his fresh creation didn't stop at strength. It came out light as air, super easy to wield, and even the swordsman couldn't help asking for a new blade of their own. Kohaku fires back that if someone just asks, the blacksmith will absolutely whip one up. Asur surprised everyone. He didn't want just one sword. He went straight for around 10. And like a true mithril rank, high-ranking guys can drop way more coin than anyone else. That's when the sewer spotted something looming in the distance, because out on the horizon, a huge tree rose where it absolutely hadn't been the last time he came through those lands. He spotted a group of girls out in the field. He barges into the field and tells the protagonist to hang tight for a moment. Right as the boy steps aside to speak with them, Kohaku leans in and talks to Sophia. The woman insists the phantasma power is blasting from right over there, straight from that giant tree. And those nearby flowers probably sprouted from the very same surge of power. There was only one phantasma anyone knew that could pull this off, and it was Gaia. When Kohaku heard that name, her heart skipped a beat, because it wasn't just a word. It was the name of the goddess of the earth. Claire says humanity worshipped her like a goddess, but the truth was way darker. She was a phantom, and a demon underneath it all. She's dying to figure out why she ended up in that random village. Like the whole place is hiding a secret from her. Asher came back fast and threw out a real apology, admitting he shouldn't have kept him waiting. Turns out, that tree was planted just 3 days ago by the queen herself. Once that seed hit the dirt, it exploded into rapid growth, turning the village into a thriving, prosperous powerhouse. Soon, they started calling it the Queen's Miracle, and right at the foot of the tree, it looked like something had been carved there. Nobody could make out what it said, but it felt way too important to ignore. So he leaned in for a closer look, and for now, the swordsman set his sights on the village chief's house. That's when the girls from before came sprinting back in, bubbling with excitement, and dragged him straight to the chief's house. The protagonist couldn't help but be blown away. Though honestly, you kind of expected a guy as handsome as Asur to have that kind of charisma. Still, they pushed back to the village, and the moment they arrived, everyone felt off, like the town had changed overnight. Kohaku can't stop wondering if it's because this land somehow got so much richer in such a short time. The girls marched Asher and his assistant straight to the chief's house. And the whole time, the protagonist just couldn't wrap his head around why they'd call him an assistant. One of the women pounds on the chief's door and blurts out that visitors have arrived. The village chief, Yosaku, stands up, introduces himself, then swings the doors open and ushers the 2 visitors inside. Yosaku figured they'd come for one reason, to talk about that sacred tree. Azur claims he's here to crack the mystery of the Great Tree and to figure out how the surrounding lands exploded into abundance in just a few days. 3 days ago it surged, and they swore it was the Queen's divine power driving it all. But no one had ever even heard that their ruler could pull off something like that. Kohaku leans in and whispers to his colleague that they should get a closer look at the tree, and the swordsman shoots back that the strange writing carved into its base is catching his eye. He wants to inspect it up close, too. The chief gets it instantly and hammers Mimi Lee to lead the crew straight to the place they need to reach. The woman leads them to the great tree, and it's so impossibly tall that they practically strain their necks just to see the top. The script matches perfectly, but that spot? That's a no-go zone. Nobody's allowed to stare too closely. 2 boys stare at the strange writings, and the phantoms dive in too, analyzing every word. Sophia realizes it's an ancient runic code, etched like a forgotten secret. It claimed eternal peace was nothing but a never-ending lie, one tied to the master swordsman himself, because the master swordsman was the king of illusions. To witness the sacred battle that crushes evil, this is where the door to peace finally swings wide open. Sophia warns that bringing Mimily along would spell disaster, so they should head back and tell Azur when they're finally alone, and the protagonist nods right along with her. With Sophia, while he leaned in and hissed in his friend's ear everything he'd just uncovered. Then the swordsman shoots Mimily a grateful look, thanks her for getting them there, and vows, "We're headed back to the guild now." That night, the 2 came roaring back to the great tree's spot to hash everything out. Kohaku says his familiar cracked the message, then darts toward the tree. I genuinely think the phantoms were absolutely mind-blowing. Too bad he couldn't see them. The protagonist grabs his colleague's attention and orders him to press his hand to the tree like it's time to start reading right now. Once he finished saying every single word, the tree suddenly erupted in a blazing glow. Kohaku steadied himself, then a glow surged as the sewer steps up ahead to shield him. When they spot a door forming right in front of them, and it starts to swing, what happens next is clear. They're about to move. Claire pushes forward, determined to see what's hiding in there. Then she fires off her magic, lighting the path like a beacon. The swordsman whips around and thanks her for saving the day, begging his friend to trail behind him only because he didn't trust the danger to let them go alone. As they push forward, Azur blurts out what that door-opening spell even means. Kohaku shrugs and says he only repeated what his familiar decoded, but he never really knew the full details himself. So the swordsman figures, why not test it? And he clocks the truth. The protagonist might be the king of illusion. Then he backs it up by promising the master swordsman the writing. Since the boy couldn't find anyone else to crown as the king of illusion, he had to pin it on a phantom's Tamer. As the master swordsman spoke those words, the king of illusion followed right behind him, closing in with unstoppable intent. The door swung open for the king, and he barked the spell right alongside the master swordsman, which means if it was literally anybody else, that door would have stayed shut tight. Kohaku refused to crown himself king, but that choice still locked him into following Azur, and it makes him feel like he's not worthy of it at all. Even his own phantoms swear the claim is true, but the protagonist can't help wondering what that last sentence really means. He's set on crushing evil and becoming the sacred polarity that unlocks the door of peace. Maybe the path to the sacred ground is right nearby. Suddenly the air snaps with tension, and the swordsman warns Kohaku, "Be careful." Careful, something's creeping around them, and at first, it looked exactly like a person. Then, without warning, it turned into a whole building. Everywhere you look, a wild bunch of scenarios bursts into the picture. Then, just like that, the 2 of them found themselves right in the heart of Mirazona village. Sophia swears this place is the land's old memory, Mirazona's past, trapped here. When they finally looked over, they spotted an injured kid sobbing her heart out, and Azur rushed in to help her. Then the kid stormed right past him, not even a glance, like he didn't exist. Then the protagonist shrugs and says it was probably just a memory, and admits they had no way to reach her or make contact. It wrecks the swordsman to see an injured, heartbroken child left all alone. Claire blurts out that she thought the kid was Ryugo, and the name slams straight into Asura's mind, because it's the very name of the holy swordsman. At that moment, Sophia leaned in and spilled the story of something that happened 300 years ago. An evil dragon ravaged the country, and Ryugo, after his death, became the one who finally brought it down. He's forged into a legend, and the protagonist steals a heartbeat to remember it all. He stared at the name Ryugo on the page as a kid so young he could barely understand what it meant. Claire points out that none of this changes the truth guy is still a whiny baby. Even after he finally became a swordsman, that guy still fought a losing battle with his own condition. He wouldn't even step up against dragons. Ryugo was so cowardly, he bolted. The second common demons showed up. He also couldn't help himself. He flirted with women every second, and Kohaku was just relieved Acer couldn't hear his ghosts because they were spitting out so many crazy lies that would have crushed his whole legend. The protagonist demands, so the legend's fake, and the fire spirit blasts back, swearing his power is real because this whole mess was forged by one thing: the protagonist's own cowardice. He trained and prepared in total solitude, forging himself for death. This was the secret behind his unstoppable strength. Even the legends talked about Ryugo's brutal training, but nobody knew where it started, so Kohaku can't stop asking, why did he turn into a swordsman in the first place? Even if it was a divine assignment, he still had other roads he could have taken in that kind of thinking. Sophia says Ryugo absolutely hated swords and tried to ditch the whole sword path again and again, but his raw talent wouldn't let him. Then, out of nowhere, a woman rushes in calling for the boy and checks how he's doing. Relief hit the protagonist hard, because it looked like Ryugo's sister finally showed up. Then a sword slices the air as it reveals two men tailing the woman, lurking in the shadows. The moment you catch your breath, the scene rockets right into a house. Ryugo hurled himself into danger, determined to shield his sister from those men, but they snatched her as a hostage and planned to auction her off like merchandise. Because to them, that disposable kid of a boy had zero worth. The girl keeps spiraling in worry about. She tries to talk about her little brother, and a brutal punch shuts her up. That pushes Ryugo over the edge. He lets out a furious scream, defending the men around him. Then he swings his improvised weapon and smashes the first one right in front of him. Sword in hand, he struck down the first one, and that brutal wind stunned the other guy, still gripping the woman like she was already trapped. Asura sensed a strange power pulsing from the wooden sword, and Kohaku guessed it was there because the boy had trained before. But Ryugo moved like a total amateur, but his raw talent ignited the whole fight, and it carried him straight to victory. Then the story rips you out and drops you straight into the forest. This time, Ryugo had grown up, and he wasn't traveling alone. A woman walked by his side. The woman, maybe his mentor, leans in and orders him to tear down the lizard man standing right in front of them. Ryugo screamed tears through the air, pure terror, because he's convinced he'll never, ever beat something like that. He storms to his master, fuming that they tossed him against that terrifying creature. Kohaku and Asura are still reeling, but Claire steps in and swears it's the real him. This is how he truly is. The mentor leans in and asks when the boy will finally build real confidence because, yeah, he's got sword talent, but talent isn't the whole game. The boy keeps screaming his lungs out, because at least he wanted to use his talent to charm girls, way more useful in his eyes, while the protagonist snaps to attention and checks on Asher, who's gone deathly pale from the shock. Meanwhile, his master shrugs it off and tells him not to sweat it. After all, the boy was never exactly popular to start with. After that, the two start a heated argument, and before long, the lizard man clocks them right from the screams. The master shoots a warning. If Ryugo doesn't take care of him right now, they're going to die. When the boy refuses, she cuts the moment short and he steels himself and decides to drop a secret that could change everything. Secret strong men were practically irresistible to women. Ryugo unleashed a brutal strike, and in just seconds the monster was gone. Now, he was fired up, ready to grind toward one single, razor-clear goal. Meanwhile, Kohaku and Asura just stare in stunned disbelief as the scene unfolds, until it cuts to something new again. This time, Ryugo didn't just get a surprise. He got one that knocked the breath out of him when he realized he and his mentor, Mio, had fallen in love. Those two leaned on each other so hard they practically pulled each other into their own orbit, and before long, they were getting seriously close. Then the scene finally shifts, and the two guys watching exhale, feeling like everything really turned out okay. Right then, Ryugo lets it slip. Still can't bond with the sword, and no matter what he tries, he'll never truly be able to use it. And it's got me thinking, maybe he didn't just dislike swords. Maybe he hated them. Maybe he sensed it all from her the moment she taught him over time. So he shut her down by stepping in and correcting her. He only loved that sword for one reason. It brought them together, and nothing, ever, would change that. These words hit the girl just right. She bursts into laughter and nods, saying, "Yep, that's true. Yeah." Ashura clocked it the moment it happened. On this very day, the two vowed they'd never touch a sword again. Maybe they just wanted to slip away from all the fighting and finally live in peace. The protagonist spotted yet another scene, and it looked like something big was about to go down, almost too perfect to be real. It looked like Ryugo was seconds away from starting a family with Mio. Then they tore back into the forest, pushing straight toward Mirazona village. Ryugo spotted smoke up ahead and sprinted back home at full speed. Kohaku and Azure chased after him until they finally reached the village. That got swallowed whole by flames and left pure chaos in its wake. Right then, time felt like it froze and the duo couldn't stop wondering why. The protagonist jabbed forward and shouted that an invisible wall blocked their path etched with eerie, strange writing. It said the future saint of the sword was trapped in a desperate mess. Clueless about what to do while everyone who accepted the test, they had to prove how strong they were in just 60 seconds. Now Asher finally got it. This wasn't some random ritual. It was the Sword Saint's trial, checking whether that young man was truly worthy to inherit everything Ryugu left behind. So the swordsman had to scramble for a way out of this mess fast. Kohaku couldn't stop wondering what revealing his power would even change in a moment like this. Meanwhile, the sword simmered with thoughts of what could happen next. They both chased the same goal: reach, raw speed, and the exact power needed to make it happen. At last, he tells his friend to back up a little because even without total certainty, being here finally gives him one thing he can do. When Aster planted himself in that exact stance like Ryugo, he finally got why they crowned him a genius. That's the real no-mistakes form of that technique. And with that, he snapped his sword up and started swinging it like a warning. The ancient master's blade carved its way through sword and steel, merging like one unstoppable strike. If only Ryugo hadn't ditched the sword's path. Then he'd have a blade of his own right now. Then he'd finally carve out a future where he could save his family. That's why the blade the swordsman used to carry couldn't take his full power. It crumbled under it. So everything snapped, and that collapse ripped his sister's life away. His sheer talent lit a fire under him, and he vowed to snatch the sword up again, forcing him to watch the life of someone he loved get ripped away. After that jaw-dropping moment, Ryugo snapped back into action and swung his sword to rip through his enemies. Then his life turned into pure hell until the world finally started calling him the Saint of the Sword. Still, at the very least, at least he managed to keep Mio breathing. Then the test finally confirmed this current swordsman's power had been judged and proven. He proved it, then surged with the strength to save everyone and earned the title everyone feared and respected, Saint of the Sword. Now, the only thing left was to unlock the real, unstoppable power hidden behind that title. A bunch of bright glimmers swarmed around the characters in a stinking sewer, and he felt that power burning hot inside him. He was pumped to keep going right where you left off. Hugo's legacy, he unleashed every last ounce of his power. With this power in his hands, he'd swing his sword to tear through danger and save everyone right beside him. Right then, Ryugo burst into the scene out of nowhere, murdered yet still glowing overhead. He smiled down from the sky, waiting to tally the fate of his descendant. As the glow died down, the final stretch of the test was almost here, and the two of them sprinted toward what looked like the only way out. Then, right when they were halfway there, suddenly, Asher said the ancient swordmaster was pure power, but to earn it, he had to fight through hell first. Ryugo swallowed his regrets and faced his weaknesses head-on, so he swore he'd never repeat them then. Hatred fueled his grip as he raised his sword. In the end, Kohaku finally admitted every bit of that legendary man was just as human as the rest. It's something the books never once mentioned, so the protagonist was thrilled just to finally learn it, but it still hit him deep and left him shaken. Claire herself couldn't hide her worry when she saw him break down and cry like that. He apologized, and that Tamer couldn't shake it. Maybe he'd finally realized that Ryugo, the one he admired, had been through horrors he never even knew about. I was so relieved they finally got to face the truth side by side because he too idolized that ancient sword master with his whole soul. And after seeing it all, they should take what they learned and live like every second matters. They teamed up and fought their way out of that place one step at a time until they finally found the exit. Then a stabbing chill hit hard out of nowhere, and Kohaku snapped, stunned, wondering what the heck just happened, until Sophia blurted out that the test's creator was standing right in front of them. Between the swarm of phantoms, he stood above them, all unstoppable, unbeatable in every clash. Riga, the god of the sword. Riga dropped down from the sky like a storm and dropped to one knee before Kohaku, shouting that he was the king. Sophia calls him out as a phantom, nervous, and when the guy introduces himself, the protagonist steps in fast, greets him, and begs him not to kneel. The god rushes in to apologize for dragging his king into all this, and Kohaku waves it off, saying he gets it. There's a reason behind everything. Riga nods along, because this is exactly how they can finally reach eternal peace. According to the ancient writing, to pull it off, you needed the king of illusion and the master of the sword. But here's the kicker. There were 4 more people with them. We just can't name them anymore. And now Kohaku leans in and demands, is the world really not peaceful enough for you? And the god snaps back that peace is in grave danger, which shocks Sophia so hard she blurts out, are you telling me that's coming? Gaia is holding it back right now, but the seal is slipping day by day, getting weaker and weaker. It feels like this whole disaster could snap back any second. Kohaku demanded they explain what's going on, because everyone there was completely lost until the maid finally snapped that the world now has 3 different races: humans, demi-humans, and demons. And then, 3,000 years ago, back then, the world had a 4th race that carried pure evil, straight up the devil. The protagonist demands those creatures be wiped out, and Sophia cuts in fast. It's not as simple as that. Rage, those things were sealed away, period. Rega says if it were only the devils, they could handle it, but the real nightmare is this. It's not just them trapped in there, but not just any outcast. This was the one who got cast out of the world, the absolute worst of the worst. The legendary Devil King, Sakua, is about to storm back any moment now. He's the one who gathered all the devils to unleash cruelty and total destruction. Kohaku had heard rumors of devils and fairy tales, but she'd never once heard about their king. Sophia tells them the truth because they were too powerful to scare every last soul on Earth. Humanity had to erase them from reality, and people's own minds quietly locked away his memories, so this nightmare could never rise again. The protagonist knew it sounded insane, but he couldn't stop. He had to figure out his part in all this, and Riga lays it out. He's got to team up with the others to take down the Devil King. While the protagonist wore the blandest, most unreadable faces imaginable, the god burned with anticipation, because he was the only shot at beating the Great King. Before long, Rhaegar realized his time was slipping away, and the protagonist was shocked. He thought the god had come to battle them, but don't get attached, his presence fades fast. If they want a contract with his real self, they've got to reach the Village of the Sword. And once Kohaku shows up, Riga will be there, waiting. Then he'll take his leave. He tore away from the calmer one, who was still stuck in stunned disbelief. A sewer bursts out of the prison of time and demands, what happened? The protagonist doesn't even bother to explain. He shrugs it off and storms out of the giant tree. He never imagined he'd hear about the Devil King right now, and he's panicking. How on earth is he supposed to explain this mess to a sewer after what just happened? The second the two stepped through the door, it disappeared like it never existed at all. The swordsman spots Kohaku's worried face and demands answers. But the boy just shuts down and won't say a word. He blurts out that they should go check out the very place where Ryugo was born. That sure would light up with joy if the protagonist showed up to keep it company. And he finally gives in, agreeing to the invitation. Next morning they were back at the inn, and the whole story felt like it was about to kick off again. Kohaku was still replaying every word he'd just heard, but then Rega showed up out of nowhere, and the whole moment hit him like a bolt. So sudden, it didn't feel real. Claire insists her master's freaking out for nothing. She can blow the Devil King out of existence with a snap of her fingers, and Sophia and Fenrir jump in, saying they do the exact same thing. Meanwhile, Frederica couldn't shake the worry Kohaku wasn't eating, and their eyes looked miles away. To lift his spirits, the girl leans in and says, I've got something good to tell you. When exhaustion hits, a big plate of food turns everything around, and she beams as she stuffs the protagonist, leaving Claire and Sophia seething with envy. Federica leans in and says an old person once told her, the day's happiness starts at breakfast. And when the protagonist nods, he asks, "So who told you that?" And yeah, the girl's mom totally rips into her, scolding her for being called old. The woman can't help but tease her daughter, because she's way too buddy with the guest. Frederica bolts in total embarrassment, and her mother slips out shortly after. Claire frets that the little girl might start to like Kohaku, and Sophia shrugs it off by saying that in 5 years Frederica will be a stunning young lady. Meanwhile, the protagonist lets out a heavy sigh, because right now, the girl is still just a child, and the two just snap back. None of that even matters, because the real question is one thing: how deep your love goes. Right in the middle of the talk, Frederica blurts to her mom that her father says the pepper is seconds away from running out. When they look genuinely freaked out, the protagonist steps in and offers to buy it for them. And honestly, the folks at that inn had always been so damn kind that it lit a fire in him. He just had to repay them. Then his mother jumps in and tells him to grab Frederica as his guide around the city for shopping. The two end up hanging out together, and the girl can't stop herself from wondering what kind of monsters he's been hunting now that he's finally a hunter. Kohaku told us it was a giant spider nearly half the size of the inn. But thanks to everyone who showed up and rallied together, he was able to bring it down. Hearing that, Frederica's curiosity explodes. She demands to know where her family is, and the protagonist panics trying to explain it. So Claire jumps in and shuts it down. She sparks the air with letters of fire, spelling out her name and her whole intro to the girl, herself. Sophia drops the truth like it's obvious kids are simple, and that simplicity is honestly a good thing. It lit up every phantasm's heart because people like that believed in them, even without ever laying eyes on them. That's when they heard people whispering about missing kids, how one vanishes every single month, and how the whole town was starting to panic. Sophia thinks it connects straight back to what Asar warned about earlier: this cult business and everything tied to Gurunkai. Tai, the one who forms a crew and worships the spirit of fire like it's sacred. The protagonist tells Frederica they need to wrap up shopping fast and head back, because her parents will freak out if they're late, especially over the pepper. Finally, Kohaku slams the last purchase into place, then dashes back to his room. Meanwhile, the maid dug through missing person records like it was a clue hunt, and even though some leads looked shaky, one thing was obvious: Gurunkai was behind it. Claire demanded they reveal their location, because if they didn't, she swore she'd wipe them out with her own hands. Sophia begged the spirit to calm down, because Gurunkai was supposed to be wiped out 3 years ago, yet they somehow regrouped and rebuilt. So this time they had to be finished all at once, or it would turn into a never-ending hunt. Sure, you could wipe out the group fast, but if even one member slips away, you'll just watch it all restart from zero. Hearing that, Claire snapped, then immediately apologized, letting her anger get the best of her for a moment. Kohaku finally pushes the plan say goodbye in 2 groups. He and Claire would rush to tell the guild, while the other 2 sprinted straight for the hideout's location. They'd pull out every stop to fix this together. At the Tamer's Guild, the protagonist rushed in to meet the master, who was waiting. Kohaku leans in and asks if Toa's heard the city's rumors, and Toa admits she has everything's flying around, even the terrifying talk about missing children. And the Tamer leans in, demanding to know how long they've been on to the disappearances. She tells him it hits once a month, 3 times so far, and the disappearances can strike anywhere, with zero pattern at all. But the second you saw the boy's face, you knew he'd pieced together exactly what was happening. Then Kohaku spills the truth about Gurunkai. Toa thought they'd gone silent for the past 3 years, but nope, they're still moving, and the protagonist's family is hunting them down. So the master instantly realized he'd need even more intel, because only a platinum rank handler would know these facts, and this case was anything but normal. Right before the master interrogates him about who spilled the secret of Gurunkai, the protagonist snaps shut. Silence hits hard. Then the woman fires off a command. She tells her assistant to bring the documents. When Kohaku starts to panic about explaining, Toa bursts out laughing because she was only joking. She gets it now. Whoever told him must have trusted him enough to open up about it. Nobody in the Gurunkai shows up until the ritual time, and honestly, the best hope was that the 4th abduction would hit this month. The protagonist bows to the master, then swears that if he ever learns anything else, he'll pass it on, because if his family knows more, he'll make sure the master does too. Tawa nods and says, All right, after this, we're heading straight to the Battle Guild to tell that sewer crew everything. When Kohaku storms back to the inn, his phantasms greet him at once. And it looks like the chase finally paid off, because the hideout was found. Sophia points out where they've been hiding. And when they finally count the crowd, there are 13 people total. 9 men and 4 women, according to Fenrir. Everyone here was dressed in red robes, and that was the only thing they truly understood. Kohaku spots what the two pulled off, thanks them, and then drops the real plan. He's heading straight for the Battle Guild. Tawa nodded and decided to spill everything he knew about Gorenkai so he could pull in more allies. Sophia nodded, saying she finally understood how Claire felt about that cult, and then she swore they'd make them regret every single thing they were pulling. Fenrir nodded and swore they'd avenge Dacus too. But the maid drops the bombshell. Both the latest disappearance and what happened 3 years back all went down under a brand new moon. Meanwhile, the master gets word that a new moon is about to hit in just 3 days. Not long after, they burst into the Battle Guild and sat down for a high-stakes meeting. The guild master's coming too, and Kohaku can't stop wondering who in the world they're bringing along. Leon showed up fast, wasted no time, and apologized for making them wait. He steps up, introduces himself to the group, then shoots a sharp comment. Toa's still packing on that heavy makeup, trying to bury the signs of aging. The woman shoots back that Leon hasn't grown a single centimeter either, and the protagonist suddenly realizes that these two, they just couldn't click once those two started bickering among the adventurers. They turned the whole group into a pressure cooker, and the atmosphere went to the absolute worst. Until a sewer pipe starts whispering to his master that the guy right beside him is the same Kohaku he talked about earlier. The guildmaster strides up to the protagonist and studies him up close like he's trying to crack his secrets. And that's what gets his phantoms locked in, ready to jump in and protect their master the moment anything goes wrong. Leon cuts him off and says the kid ahead of him has a powerfully good aura-like nobility is blazing right from the inside. And right then, his phantom stirred. Blown away by just how incredible that man was, Leon could feel Kohaku's familiars closing in and counting them. He knew there were 3 in all. Even with his eyes useless, he still felt their crushing power pressing in from the dark. The protagonist practically beamed at the news then. Toa snapped at the guildmaster, cutting the joy in half. Of course he was clearly spinning charm to hook her right there in front of the hunter. Leon lets out a laugh. Sure, the woman has turned tail, but the truth hits him fast, and he realizes he's dead wrong. He just knew their visit had a real reason, so he locked in and decided to hear exactly what they were about to talk about. Tawa holds up a document and reveals the exact location of Gorenkai. Leon finally realizes the group has to kick back into motion after 3 brutal years of silence. The moment he hears that Kohaku was the one who did the search, the master demands you spill every last detail. The master trusts what he just heard, and he immediately realizes, yeah, that's why the boy's glowing with joy. And at that point, there's nothing left to worry about, because Leon's already been talking about him non-stop, and Asher told him all of it. If Asher had faith in him, then Leon was ready to match it right there, full force. When he realizes the swordsman feels that way, it hits him hard like the truth just struck. Right there, Leon snapped that it was time to kick off the fight and avenge Dacus. This time, they promised they'd tear Gorenkai apart for good. The Tamer's Guild was willing to hand out mithril-ranked help members way above anything he'd ever seen. And that's when the protagonist finally clocked that he'd never met a single one of them before. Leon warns that hanging around with too many people could paint a target on their backs, so they decide to roll with exactly 8. Cole tells them he's sure that in just 3 days the ritual kidnapping will strike, and he's already cooking up a plan to take down that crew, without the child getting a single scratch. If that was the plan, the guild leader snapped into action first. They'd unleash a rumor that the person had vanished, then slam the brakes on anyone thinking about leaving after dark, and then the kidnapping would be less likely to happen. Leon pushed hard for Toa to team up and spread the rumor too, using the Tamer's Guild, but the woman kept laughing like it was nothing, and that sound sent the man into a full-blown rage, until she finally cracks and agrees to his request, then decides it's time to leave. Before it all goes down, a sword whispers to Kohaku, "Do the." They give it everything they've got, and the protagonist nods like, "Yep, I'm in." At night, the Tamer's Guild crowd packed into the master's room, all eyes locked in. 2 mithril-ranked tamers got summoned, And trust me, both of them had personalities that practically punched a hole through the room. The moment he spots Karon, he needles her with these half-baked, lazy remarks. And it drives her up the wall. The master leans in and murmurs that she clocked Kahaku's shock, and that they're nowhere near what they look like. Karon then snaps, asking whether the guy standing in front of her is really the so-called Phantom Tamer, and the other hunter can't help but get curious, because that boy's got a striking presence, and he can tell Fenrir is right there with him. It was an honor for him to work with the legendary Moon Phantom then. Kohaku's eyes went wide, because the Tamer in front of him could actually see him. He's about to question him, but the guy cuts in and says it wasn't him at all. The Black Lions, his familiars, were the ones who told him about the protagonist, and it totally floors him because Fenrir is way too famous for him to have missed it. But Karon can clearly tell Kohaku's got serious talent, standing right beside the primordial flame. Claire's nerves crash as the girl's familiars bow to her like she's royalty, and the protagonist clocks what he's got to do next. He'll need to carve out time later to study his own phantoms more. Finally, Toa decides to push forward because the introductions are officially done. In just 3 days, the crew would kick off their mission to wipe out the Girinkai. No mercy, no delays. The protagonist swore he'd finally settle down. That's everything you need to know about Dacus, once and for all. 3 long days crash by, and then right on cue, the night of the new moon finally hits. The roped figures spotted the street was almost empty this time, and they knew it had to be the rumors driving everyone away. If this keeps going, the ritual is going to get cut off midstream. Usually they'd want a fancy little kid, but tonight they chose an orphan instead. The masked duo closes in on a lonely spot where a short figure stands all by themselves, and one of them swings and hits the kid right in the face and knocks them out cold, making sure they live, not die at least. They finally scored the right person to pull off the ritual this time. They sprint off together, clutching the finished abduction as they vanish into the chaos. Then Kohaku and the whole team charge after them, not letting them get away. So the video slams shut right here. Don't miss the next part. Keep watching. Smash that notification bell so you don't miss a single update. Catch you next time on TOB's channel.